Hello everyone, welcome to this meeting of the Windsor Town Forum on Tuesday the 19th of September. My name is Councillor Alison Carpenter and I will be chairing this meeting this evening. This meeting is being held in person and via Zoom and streamed live to the public on YouTube. I remind all attendees that participation in this meeting indicates consent to the audio and video being streamed live and acknowledgement that after the meeting it will continue to be available in the public domain. Firstly, it'd be useful if all the panel members and officers could introduce themselves so that the public are aware of who is in this meeting and the role they are undertaking. As I said, I'm Councillor Alison Carpenter, I'm Councillor for Clewer and Dedworth East and I'm chairing this meeting today. Hand over to Vice Chair, thank you.
Councillor Amy Teasey, Vice Chair and Councillor for Clewer East.
Paul Roach, Windsor and Eton Town Manager.
Lawrence Ellis, Democratic Services and Clerk to this forum here.
Councillor Mark Wilson, Councillor for Eton and Castle.
Councillor Devon Davis, also Councillor for Eton and Castle, and I'm substituting for Neil Knowles.
I think we've got a couple on Zoom. Would you also like to introduce yourselves, please?
Good evening. This is Shasta Parveen, Infrastructure Service Lead.
Good evening. My name is Councillor Wisdom DeCosta. I represent Clewer and Dedworth West.
Thank you. Do we have Chris Joyce joining us yet? Do we know?
He's not online yet, so I can obviously hear. I think he's coming shortly.
Thank you. So I request that meeting participants do not speak unless I specifically invite you to do so. Once I've invited you to speak, before you do, please state your name and the capacity in which you are speaking if appropriate. I will also ask officers to speak at appropriate times. If any individual attempts to disrupt the meeting, I'm able to use my powers in the Constitution to adjourn the meeting or have the individual removed. We'll now start on the agenda items. Lawrence, do we have any apologies for absence?
Yes, Chair. Apologies due from Councillor Knowles and he is substituted by Councillor Devon Davies.
Okay, thank you very much. Do we have any declarations of interest? No. Okay, so we'll now move on to the minutes from the last meeting, which was on the 18th of July 2023. Do we have approval that these minutes reflect a true and accurate record of the meeting?
Yes, Chair.
Is that agreed? Yeah. Thank you. So there were a few outstanding actions from the last meeting. I'll just quickly go through. So the outstanding actions, one of them was from Andrew Durrant about the project works on Goswell Hill. I think we've sent out a press release as part of the minutes regarding what's happening there. And also that relates to the opening of the coach park to improve access from the footbridge to the arches. So I think that's all part of that project. A motion to be forwarded at full council to change the name of Windsor Town Forum to Windsor Forum. That's something we're going to be discussing at the next full council meeting next Tuesday. Also, at a future meeting, we're going to invite a relevant officer or councillor to discuss the council's economic growth plan, which is something I think Sarah suggested at a previous meeting. So that's something we definitely want to do in a future meeting. Investigate whether there are grants available for the forum to use. I think Councillor DeCosta, that's something maybe you could look at for future. And vision for Windsor to be added to the agenda, which we're going to discuss today, hopefully, the officer turns up. And then we have one other action that was Chris Wheeler to investigate with the highways team and contractors on the repair works on Victoria Street. So I have an update on that. The section of Victoria Street that was resurfaced was the area in the most urgent need of repair. Other sections of Victoria Street on the programme for resurfacing and will be included in the 2024 programme. The road will be monitored and work could be accelerated if further deterioration occurs. Meanwhile, regular inspection will identify and address any specific individual defects noted. So those are the actions from the last meeting. So now I'm going to hand over to
Councillor DeCosta's got his hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry, Councillor DeCosta, would you like to ask a question?
Yes, I believe there was one other item which I'd asked that the relevant people make a presentation to the forum on what RBWM said to Heathrow's noise management plan consultation. So it would be very useful to understand the approach that the council is taking to protect residents in Windsor on that issue.
Right, I don't believe that we have received an update on that, but we'll continue to chase that in time for the next meeting. Is that accurate, Lawrence?
Yeah, any questions from the previous meeting, which is part of the agenda pack? I did ask about that, and while RBWM had responded, it's the response is not publicly available yet. Obviously, once it's available, it can be added to an agenda in some shape or form.
Thank you. Okay, do you have any other questions before we move on? No? It's good to see a good room full of residents. Thank you for joining. I'm now going to hand over to our town manager, Paul Roach. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I have slightly increased my number of slides from our last presentation. Hopefully Lawrence will get the presentation up for me. So I just really was going to cover the town centre health check, starting with footfall, moving on to vacancy rate. And then, yes, so we have, this is the monthly, if you go to the next slide, please.
Oh, sorry, I need to share this.
Starts off with footfall. Footfall generally has again moved and increased. If you go to the second slide for me. That's the one. Thank you. So you'll see from the slide, we expect usually over the summer, August time, we start to see the footfall drop as obviously summer holidays finish, the schools go back, and generally we see a drop, and you can see over the last sort of 4 or 5 years, that trend hasn't changed. We are still, despite that, has seen a 6.5% increase on footfall in the same period last year. So it has been positive in that respect. The total number of visitors in the month commencing the 31st of July was just over 655,000 visits in the town centre. Bearing in mind, and I have to remind people, this is just taken from one footfall counter, which is on Pescud Street. So we do, the 2 shopping centres have their own footfall counters. We are currently looking at a new scheme to monitor footfall across the whole of the town centre. So I hope to bring that to the forum in the coming months once we've updated all of the data to go into it, and then that will give us a much accurate picture of movement around the town centre and movement in and out of the shopping centres as well. But for the moment, we're basing our footfall data on the one counter in Pescud Street. Could I have the next slide, please, Lawrence? So, next one. It's just what I've reported. In terms of coach and car parking, again, that's been fairly static, 0%. So it hasn't gone up, hasn't gone down. And again, we would expect to see that. You can see that sort of the light blue line that just seems to follow last year's figure. So we haven't seen much movement there. The only positive we've seen for car parking or coach parking has increased again since last year, and that's seen a 23% increase. And that's, those of you that have been in town, you've probably noticed that we are starting to see a lot more tour groups come back. So that is showing in the usage of the coach park. And in terms of vacancy rates, we've seen that slightly come down to 9.4%. It was about 9.8 the last time I reported on this. Compared to national average, 13.8%. So we tend to do slightly better than the national average, although there are still areas that concern us greatly. Recent vacant units, Ring Gallery. Some of you may question, what's the Ring Gallery? They actually opened and closed within sort of 3 weeks. So they actually probably should appear twice on this as a newly opened store and a newly closed one. So I'm not sure what happened. I did go in and see them and welcomed them to Windsor, but within 3 weeks, an empty unit. So that's unfortunate. New Look, I think most people know about. Pen River and Top Rent, I've mentioned, they are 2 long-term units that disappeared from our streets last month. And obviously Barclays Bank, I should have added HSBC as well on this list. So the 2 banks have now closed. And there has been a lot of debate and commentary about banks generally, I know, across the country. I've been looking at, there is a new scheme called Banking Hubs, and whether or not we could fit the bill for that. There is a strict criteria for banking hubs, and for those that don't know, they're effectively all of the banks come together and share a space, usually via the post office service, but their criteria is based on how many cash points are currently in the town centre, and we do actually still have a number of cash points. Positive news is nationwide. We still have nationwide. They're not planning to go. They've made a commitment, I think, nationally, that they are going to keep and support their local branches. So we are looking at that and to see whether or not there is scope for that, because clearly there is a need, certainly from people that I've spoken to, and the number of tourists, and a lot of our tourists still want to use cash. So it's something that we need to investigate a little bit further. And we may be able to come back to the forum to let you know how we're doing with that, but it may well be that we don't quite fit that criteria, because we do have still quite I'm not going to say a high number of cash points, but we do have cash points.
Sorry, Chris is trying to come in. That's the second time he's trying to come in.
Thank you. Stores recently opened, so we have had a number of stores open over the last sort of 3 or 4 weeks. I won't go through all of them. Most people have been bugging me about Greggs, so Greggs is now open, and they seem to be doing very well. They're over 2 floors. It's one of probably their second largest unit actually in this part of the world. It's a very big unit. And we do have a number of other stores coming online under development. Speaking to the agent at Halifax, they have some interest in a unit, in someone taking that unit shortly. New Look, again, most of you know that that's recently become vacant, but there is a new unit going in there. I'm allowed to say actually, Mango. So yeah, it's a good brand, and has been around for quite some time. Topshop unit, can't say too much on that at the moment. It has been empty for some time, but there is still a lot of interest in that. The Valerie Patisserie will be let, and I think is currently under redevelopment, but it will be let shortly. We've got Pims and Brothers in St Leonard's Road, and Corals also. There's interest in both of those units. So there is some movement in a number of units. So we've still got some that will come forward in the coming months. I expect that they will be open before Christmas. And it's good to see that we've got a couple of non-food ones there as well. So I'm not going to say it's looking super and positive. We are doing better than most town centres, and we still have a lot of interest in a lot of the other empty units that I mentioned earlier that have been that I mentioned at the last meeting that have been vacant for some time. Just move on to the last slide for me, please, Lawrence. I've added this one in. I'm doing a lot more work now with. It's since COVID actually. We only actually had maybe 1 or 2 agents that really solely dealt with retail units, Christopher Thomas being one of them, Romans being another. Since COVID, we've actually seen quite a large number of new agencies come on board and trying to let units in the town centre, which is good, because it means that hopefully that net is cast a little bit further. So it means that I've got a lot more work to do in terms of contacting more people, but we are contacting all of the agents that are currently looking after those empty units, those that have been identified. We still have a number of units that we're not quite sure who the agent is, or indeed who the landlord is. But our objective over the next couple of months is to make sure we identify every single agent and we contact them and we get an update on what is happening with that unit, or indeed we're passing on information to them about particular people that might be interested in that unit, or indeed the types of offer that we would like to see in the town centre. So, and that's actually already proved quite useful. The Halifax currently being let by Smiths, and a discussion with them, they were able to relay some of the work that they're doing for both that Halifax unit in the top left-hand corner, top left-hand corner, and actually the Corals unit, the former Corals unit, and the tattoo parlour. So there's some work that's being done there to hopefully bring those units back on stream. And the Jojo Mama, that also has been, that is actually under development. I think there was a planning application that came in for that over the summer, so that will be let shortly. And one of the last things I've mentioned on my presentation is the production of a welcome pack. That primarily is really to help tenants that come into the town, to let them know all of the different aspects of the council, and from planning, licensing, permits, highways, to let them know where they need to go to, particularly those that are in listed properties, and the problems that we have where people have moved in and decided they can do what they want with that property. So we're trying to, now, again, it's another bit of work that we're doing with agents as well. Agents will always tell me, they did tell them that it was a listed property, but for whatever reason, that doesn't seem to have hit home. So we're looking to produce something quite substantial with that pack that will be issued to every new tenant that comes into Windsor, and gives them a full sort of directory of who to contact, certainly what department to contact, and how we can help them if they've got any issues with the town centre. And that's the end of my presentation, Chair.
Thank you very much. That's very interesting. So do we have any questions? Okay. So if you'd like to introduce yourself and turn the microphone on. Thank you.
Hi, yes, Sarah Walker, resident of Pluett East. Thank you, Paul. That was very helpful. I wanted to ask, there's a couple of things that you mentioned. The footfall has increased in the town, and you also mentioned that the tourist footfall has increased. Are you able to split footfall between tourists and residents in the town? And my second question is just wondering whether you can clarify, for the benefit of residents, how commercial and retail lettings work, and how rates work, and what the impact of the borough could be on reducing rates and encouraging better, more occupancy in the town. Could you just explain the process? Thank you.
Thank you, through the chair. So, yeah, so in terms of the footfall, the short answer is, with our current measuring of footfall, we can't determine which footfall is residential footfall and which footfall isn't. The new scheme that we're looking at is actually active now, but it's sort of operating in the background. It's a system called Visitor Insights, and it sort of monitors movement in the town centre via GPS, via any mobile phone device, or any device with a GPS signal. Now, what that system can also do is tell us where that particular device has come from. So it's one of the benefits of that scheme. So we've signed up to a 3-year programme. We literally have just spent the last sort of 3 months just populating all the data. So we've entered every single property in Windsor Town Centre, in Eton Town Centre, in Ascot Town Centre, so we could potentially identify people that move into different shops and how they move around the town. So it gives a very generic sort of idea of movement throughout the town centre. But we know that we can also hit a certain button and it tells you where has that GPS come from. So that could tell us they've come from 5 miles away, 10 miles away. Not sure if it will monitor from another country, but certainly it will be able to tell us those that are not based in the town centre, which will be useful. In answer to your second question with regards to commercial lettings, now, if I was a business, I'd be saying, yes, absolutely, the council need to reduce rates. But the way the rates work is that the council don't set the rates, they only collect them. They have limited powers around offering discounts. So what we used to offer, and we probably do need to check this, but we used to offer, there used to be an offer whereby if a property was empty for more than 12 months, then there would be a retail hardship sort of discount for whoever came in as an incentive to have that unit let. I think we're still running that. We were certainly running that shortly after COVID. I'm not too sure where we are with it now, but we usually have a sort of an annual review with the business rates team to say, you know, what are the offers. Obviously, there's charitable status and a number of offers around pop-up shops and how that can benefit individuals. But yeah, it's always a difficult one with business rates as to, you know, that benefit that or that control of the rates. But we always say to businesses, it's always worth getting your rates reviewed, especially since COVID. And a lot of businesses found that they fell out of the business rate scheme because they were too small. So yeah, I'm going to say there's no hard and fast rule with it, but businesses, we always encourage to get professional advice, make sure you get your valuation, VOA, make sure you get a proper valuation of your particular unit, because some units are sometimes broken up. We found recently that a lot more larger units are being split up into smaller units. And so then, you know, that obviously reduces the value and the rateable value of that unit. So, and that will lead on to ultimately a reduction in the rates of that unit. So I can't profess to be an expert. That's my very limited knowledge of rates. But yeah, our advice is always for businesses to get their own advice on that. Okay.
Thank you very much. Do we have any other questions in the room? I see we've got a couple online. Yeah, the gentleman at the end. Sorry, if you could introduce yourself. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Madam Chairman. My name is Jack Rankin. I'm the prospective parliamentary candidate for the Conservatives in Windsor. Paul, my question's about the coach park usage. You said that that had increased 23% year on year, which on the face of it is very positive. But I think there's some perception in the town, perhaps you'll challenge that sometimes there's not great dwell time from coach park users, and instead they're shuttled straight through the train park straight to the castle and back again. What can we do to increase dwell time amongst those usage and make sure that it's benefiting the town more generally?
Thank you. Yes, so since COVID, yes, you're right. 23%, as I reported, has gone up. It is from a very low base, I have to say. So, but certainly, I think the usage this year was something like this month or August was about 1,400 users. This time last year was about 1,100 users. But yes, you're right. Certainly. And there's been a number of changes. So most people will know the castle only opens 5 days a week. So it's closed Tuesdays, Wednesdays. That clearly has had an impact on the town centre. But I understand why they've done that and the reasons around that, because it's about, and actually going, hopefully answering your question in some respect. The castle did a lot of work pre-COVID around how do they improve the experience of guests, people that come into the castle, and the one thing was about they felt that they were rushed and hassled, and that there were parts of the castle that weren't particularly up to standard. So actually COVID provided them with an opportunity to, number one, go to timed entry, which meant that you didn't have this constant battle, which what happened before COVID was they have a capacity of about 10,000 people in Windsor Castle. And what you'd find is you'd have pretty much that much turn up at 9 o'clock in the morning trying to get in. And clearly that has an impact on the service. So now they've gone to timed entry. Yes, we all know, we've seen the queues at 9:30, but by the time the castle opens, they disappear and everybody sort of goes through at a fairly orderly pace. and they've not quite got back to their 10,000 capacity. I think they're about 8,000 is their capacity, 8,000, 9,000, which is not bad given what obviously took place 3 years ago. So certainly for them, in terms of that dwell time, it's about improving that experience and improving the welcome that they get, and improving how they get in and out of that space. In terms of the coach park, we know certainly it is in great need of refurbishment in terms of how people enter Windsor and how they get from the coach park to the town centre. So part of that I know has been discussed, and there is some work to do with refurbishing that. And so part of that again, the answer is, how do we improve that welcome? How do we make sure people know that when they come to Windsor, they'll be able to park the coach properly, use a lift, use a footbridge that looks the part, and that is operational. So there is still a lot more work to be done. There's currently work on a tourism strategy for the next 5 years, which will obviously highlight and unpick a lot of stuff in terms of that wider piece and all the different aspects towards visitors that come into the town, be they residents or indeed people from further afield. But that looks to be quite a comprehensive piece of work, and will pull across a whole range of different sectors to make sure that we're doing everything we can to increase that dwell time. And certainly some of the reports that we had, again, this was prior to COVID, but a lot of the reports that we had it wasn't about trying to increase the numbers of people in the town. It was about that dwell time. And how do you increase that dwell time? That's how much you're going, that's how you're going to improve the local economy, is trying to get people to spend more, not necessarily more people, but get the people that we have to spend more and to spend more time. So part of that is that whole place management, and how does the place look and feel, and making sure it looks right for the people that are coming.
Thank you. Councillor Davies.
A while ago now, a business on Peascod Street complained of slow internet speeds, and I did email about it, but it seems our email chain ran out of steam. Where are we on increasing internet speeds on Peascod Street?
Can I just interject there, because we've got a section on digital infrastructure that Shasta's going to take us through later. So if that's okay, Paul, we can park that one for the hopefully interesting presentation later. Thanks. Is there any more questions in the room? We've got a couple online. Got Anil Singh, would you like to ask your question? If you could unmute yourself and introduce yourself.
Yeah, sure. So it's Anil Singh. I'm a resident. I live on Park Street. I just, first of all, wanted to thank, I think there is an organization, something called Windsor Town Forum Partnership or something like that. They apparently provided budget for the flowers on our street. So I just wanted to, if you are connected to that, to make sure that as a resident, I really thank that, because it beautifies the street. And if you know the street, people come into the center because they're trying to go to a long walk along here. So it's very nice. It looks nice. So thank you for that. The other point is that because of the location of our street, almost everybody who drives into the center, comes into along Sheet Street, and they look left is the High Street, but they all try and park on our street, Park Street. And I think the last few weeks and months, I've seen many not coaches, vans come in and park in the middle of the road, and people jump out and they go and to the long walk, and sometimes the coach is just sitting here. I know there are wardens around, but not all the time. So I suppose it comes down to signage and things like that. So is there anything that you can do to improve that? Because that can result in residents waiting to park their cars. Yeah.
Thank you. I'll hand it to Paul, who hopefully can answer your question.
Thank you, Chair. So just to your first point, Anil, yes, the baskets, it's the Windsor Town Partnership. So it's an organisation that's been around for several years. I sort of report to them, and it's funded by a number of businesses and supported by the council. And it was agreed, I think, towards the end of July that there were some outstanding areas that required hanging baskets, and we agreed some funds to get the hanging baskets reinstated in certainly your area, and I think some other, Pescott Street, and I think Eaton High Street was some of the others. So yes, I can sort of claim that one if I may for the town partnership. In answer to your second question with regards to Park Street, yes, frustratingly, we know that there has been I say a slight increase since COVID and the reopening, and interestingly, since the Castle Hill works, we've seen quite an increase in, I'm going to say, illegal parking in Park Street. But what we're finding is that a number of vehicles are private hire vehicles are parking, and as you say, we do have wardens that come around, and what they simply do is drive off when they see them, and then come back as soon as they believe they've disappeared. I know from my colleague Neil Walters, who heads up the parking team, there are some improvements being planned for Park Street, which does include improving the signage or increasing the signage, because I think some of the signs are quite old and need to be replaced. So he is planning to do that. And I think there's also some work around identifying the residential parking bays, because they're not, I suppose, obvious to see to most people. So there's been a commitment to improve that. And then on top of that, I've been doing some investigative work around some of those vehicles that are regularly parking. They tend to be very large black Mercedes-Benz vehicles. And I've managed to identify certainly 2 private tour operators that I have now written to say, and for them to explain why they feel it necessary for their drivers to park illegally, or indeed not to pay for a parking ticket, because you can park legitimately in Park Street if there is space, but they are choosing to park in residential bays or wherever they feel it's easier for them to get in and access their customers. So we are doing some work with trying to deal with the tour operators directly, but we are finding that it is a lot of private tour operators undertaking that activity. So I'm hoping that we can try and put a stop to it. We may not eliminate all of it, but certainly the response I've had to one of our recent communications is that they're quite shocked by the behaviour of their drivers. So we will continue to communicate with them and make sure that their drivers are quite clearly told where they should and shouldn't park and how they operate when they're in the town centre.
Perfect, thank you.
Thank you for your question. I think we've got one more online, and that's Councillor Da Costa. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Paul, thank you for that presentation. So there's 2 questions I have. The first one looks at the businesses we've got in Windsor. Obviously, we want a vibrant Windsor. Have we any consultation or engagement with all of our businesses in Windsor to say, look, the guys who are here, what is it about Windsor that keeps you here? What are the key parameters, and how can we improve aspects of what's going on in Windsor so that you're going to be more successful? And a similar sort of question to the agent to say, of the people who are looking at coming into Windsor, what are the key things you really want? So then we know what to make better. And we're looking at that data set. If we've got a data set, has that been differentiated into the different types of operations? Obviously, you've got the restaurants, the clubs, then the bars. You've got other forms of shopping experiences, the department stores, food stores. So have we done much of an engagement here? Have we got that differentiated data so we can learn from it, and then therefore structure our walk and how we present to our businesses? So that's the first question. And then the second one is fairly simple. It's to do with the footfall. So Paul, that you and I and Steph and Tim Golobecker sort of looking at potential for a night bus. But obviously, it would be useful to get an idea of when we look at the footfall, can we differentiate that, segregate that into how much of that is daytime, how much of that is afternoon, evening, and late night?
Thank you. Yeah, Paul, if you could answer.
Yes, thank you. So in terms of survey work, interestingly, we just prior to COVID, again, we used to have courtesy of Windsor Yards, actually, Windsor Yards Shopping Centre. They used to do an annual operators survey. And the operator survey was a specific survey that went to all of the retail units, business units in the town centre, and asked them about, you know, their confidence, how their stores operating, their confidence in the future, what are the barriers to people coming into their store. So that did used to happen up until, I think it was literally 2019. We have recently been talking about reintroducing that again, probably more frequently, possibly every quarter, to try and get a sense or a trend as to where business is in the different areas that we ask questions on. So it is something that we are planning to do. And it's actually linked to some of the work that I mentioned earlier with regards to the Visitor Insights app that allows us to monitor footfall in and out of the town centre as to where people are going, how long they're dwelling in those spaces, and actually link some of that survey work to that, so we can actually give some of the stores some advice as to where the main footfall is. Yes, we are looking at that. We haven't started it yet, but we are definitely looking to implement that. Included in that, the data that we've been currently sort of backfilling the app does include the data sets that you talk about. So all the different sectors, are they financial institutions? Are they retailers? Are they independent? Are they health stores? Are they non-food? Are they restaurants? Are they pubs? Are they clubs? So all of that data we keep, so we can see roughly in the town centre how many units we've got covering each individual sector. Some units cover more than one, but again, that's linked to, some of the data collection that we have and that we're trying to provide on a more regular basis so that people can see how the town moves in terms of its different sectors. Clearly, we know that there is a clearly large sector where it comes to food and eateries, but equally, Windsor fortunately does still have non-food and still has a number of other sectors that it's managed to keep hold of more so than most. And then in terms of your footfall question, I think again, yes, it's the data that I've just shown, that does show, and I don't think it shows it on the presentation that I gave, but we do get other reports that give us a timeline. And so it records footfall from 12 o'clock in the morning to 11:59 in the evening. So we can see where we have footfall both during late night and during the day. With the new system, again, that will also show that same data where people are moving through the town at a given time, be that during the daytime and the night time. So we can differentiate that with the new system as we can do with the current system.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We've got another question in the room.
Duncan,
could you speak into the microphone, please, then? Thanks.
Duncan Reed from Eton. Paul, we always appreciate the work you do in the town. It's great, good stuff. Always has been. But question, seems to be an emphasis on tourism all the time in Windsor. I know we have tourists, but surely the development of the town and the thinking behind what we do and what we attract in should be resident based, as Maidenhead is, as Bracknell is, and those towns are coming up. So I'm just thinking, why is we're always focused on tourists and not residents?
Yeah, and we often hear as well that a lot of residents are going to other towns, so how do we keep them here? I think as well. Yeah, so over to you, Paul.
Yeah, no, you're right. I think there is we often refer to tourists. I tend to say visitor because I think visitor covers both, which is why I always try and say visitor, because that is, be they residential or be they from out of town. But I think one of the key factors, and it became quite apparent, actually interesting during COVID, when we were seeing that base level numbers, and we could say, right, in 2020, most of the year, that was the footfall count that we had for the town centre, and that was primarily 99% was residents. But also became evident is that actually, you know, there are a lot of people saying, "What? Where's all this? Where's all the money? Where are we going to get our business back up to speed?" Because clearly there was an importance and there is a need to acknowledge that visitor sector is a very important sector to the town centre, and without it, a large number of businesses would not be here. So that's not to say we shouldn't focus on residents, but I think I think it's important in terms of Windsor and Eton as two town centres, and with an international sort of window. It's important that we do maintain that at the best that we can, because in terms of the local economy and keeping some of the businesses here, and some of the businesses move here because they know that there is a mix of local residents and international visitors, regional visitors that come here. So it is important, but I think some of the issues that residents have around the town centre, I think, are equally shared with visitors coming out of town, because most of the complaints that we probably get are from visitors about some of the same stuff that residents have, but they're more closer to it and they see it every day. So I don't think and I'm not saying we intentionally are focusing on visitors, I don't think by focusing on that, residents are going to lose out. I think it'll only improve what we have, because we know we need to, in order to maintain that sort of profile that we need in the world. So there is still some more work to be done on that. And as I say, with the tourism strategy, part of the tourism strategy will look at what are our local residents doing, our local visitors doing, what do they need? So that won't be missed in that. But clearly it's a tourism strategy. So
No more coffee shop.
I can't, well, yeah, it's market forces. We can't stop them, unfortunately. But it's been quite interesting, because one of the fastest growing sectors is coffee shops, but equally fastest declining sector is coffee shops. So it does sort of balance itself out in a way, but not as fast as I'm sure most people would want. But yeah, we do talk to agents, but ultimately, if you've got a landlord and he wants to have his bills paid, you know, he'll go with the person that's paying, that's prepared to pay, unfortunately.
Thank you. Councillor DeCosta, we're going to move on to the next topic on the agenda now, because we want this to be a resident-led meeting. So if you could save your question, that would be great. We're going to move on now to hear from Chris Joyce, who's the Assistant Director of Infrastructure, Sustainability and Economic Growth, and he's going to tell us all about the vision for Windsor. So thank you, Chris. Thanks for joining.
You're on mute.
Unmute myself. Thank you, Chair. I think Lawrence has got the slides, which I will zip through. If we can put those up on the screen.
Are you presenting, or should I present?
If you can present, that would be wonderful.
We did share these as part of the agenda as well, so if anyone wants to refer to them later, they are on the agenda. Thanks. The one at the bottom.
Yeah, if you
Try and make full screen. Yeah. Ready?
Yeah, at the moment it's still not showing on mine. It's just got the blue circle. Oh, there we go. can I go to the first slide, please, Lawrence? So just to give a bit of background for anyone who wasn't aware, the Vision for Windsor was a piece of work that the council appointed the Prince's Foundation to undertake back in April 2022. There was a large number of engagement sessions between August and November 2022, which led to kind of a vision being developed for the town with input from stakeholders, residents, community groups, that was then adopted by Cabinet in February 2023. Next slide, please. I'm not going to read out the various vision statements, but all of the feedback was collated together to develop a vision statement for Windsor across a number of different areas. And I think this pulls on some of the discussion that was being had in the previous item around this conflict between the local community and the global community. So how do we balance the needs of residents with the desire and the demand that comes from the internationally recognised assets that we have across the borough, but particularly in Windsor, particularly the castle and the Great Park. Next slide, please. So out of that piece of work came a number of recommendations from the Prince's Foundation. So a series of strategies and actions in terms of 5 different areas: gateways and arrivals, town centre movement, character and uses, public realm, and local government governance and community partnership. And clearly these set out a number of actions under each of these. And whilst it's a really good starting point, now is the point where we need to flesh out some of these actions into real tangible, deliverable projects that can advance us towards the vision that was set out. Next slide, please. So we have started that process as officers. So there was a short delay. Obviously, the vision was adopted in February, and in May there were elections, and obviously the fallout from that was a new administration. So there has been a short pause for the work whilst we've kind of transitioned to the new administration. But we held a workshop on the 11th of September for officers as a starting point to develop a long list of potential opportunities based on the work undertaken for the vision, really to understand 3 key things. One was, what is the council already doing that is moving us towards the vision? Are there some potential quick wins based upon our knowledge of those areas and the work that's already in development? And also, what do we think, based upon the visions, might be some longer term strategic plans that need to be developed that would take a bit longer, and therefore, unless we start working on them and developing them now, it will take a long time for us to get to the point of delivery. Off the back of that work, we've got all the feedback and input from that workshop. We'll start to work with the new administration to establish their priorities based upon the vision. There will be a prioritisation process, develop a shorter list of potential projects, taking into account some of the funding opportunities, particularly in the quick wins. We absolutely, because the strength of this work came off the back of a lot of engagement with stakeholders, communities and residents, and absolutely, as part of this process, we want to put them at the heart of developing some of these key projects around the objectives and scope. And actually, there's a real opportunity to utilise the forum, the Windsor Town Forum, to start to shape some of those thoughts as well. And therefore, I would suggest, Chair, that we bring back, as the workshop's only just happened, bring back some further detail in November for discussion to get input from both residents and also members of the forum to help us shape that work. Next slide, please. Just to give a sense of what's already in progress, just in terms of some of the initial feedback. So in terms of gateways and arrivals, we've got the work going on at the Park Bridge and lift in terms of the refurbishment works there. There's a paper shortly going to Cabinet around retender of supported bus services, and we're seeking to develop a Windsor Sustains bus route as part of that in terms of developing our network. There will be some kind of car parking facelifts that are coming through the Welcome to Windsor project. In terms of town centre movement, we've had the recent improvements on Stovall Road, Barry Avenue in terms of cycling. There are some improvement works going on to wayfinding in Windsor, and also some investment in some cycle parking. In terms of the public realm, there's obviously the works going on at Castle Hill and the Platinum Jubilee Fountain that are going in or have gone in. And in terms of the local governance and community partnerships, we've already started work to develop that directory of community partnerships. And also there's a working group being set up to look at a register of landlords. And I think Paul touched on some of this, to try and improve our knowledge and information on who owns what in Windsor, so that we can ensure that we're engaging with people around how the town develops. Next slide, please. I have got any questions here, but I suggest, Lawrence, we take the slides off the screen so that it's easier to see everyone on the screen.
Thank you. Yeah, that was great. So do we have any questions? We'll start in the room. Duncan.
Yeah, Duncan Reid from Eton again. Thanks for your presentation, Chris. Good to see you again. The activities that are going on now, you gave a list of things that are happening. They're all just small, minor projects which are like fiddling at the edges as such. I don't see a vision of I believe Windsor needs a major engineering, re-engineering. You know, where things happen, what things do. We don't need cars on Thames Street. Why do we need the bus park where it is? You know, big thinking about re-engineering the whole place rather than just fiddling at the edges and not tarting up car parks. That's, I think, what's we need. A real major rethink of the whole layout of the place and how things flow, personally.
Absolutely. I agree. I'm not going to pick up on the individual suggestions necessarily, but I agree. And that was the purpose of this Windsor Vision work in the first place. And it does set out some bigger, bolder ideas that can be taken forward. And if you look at the what I said in terms of the kind of three things that we were trying to pull out in the workshop, the first was the quick wins and the things that we're already doing. So those are the fairly minor things that we can do fairly quickly with small amounts of funding, but also as part of that work, and I think we can bring back for further discussion, is those longer term strategies. So how do we flesh out some of those things, whether it's around how do we want traffic to move around the town, you know, how do we deal with car parking in the long term, what do we want to do in terms of longer term strategies for dealing with coach arrivals. All those things need to be picked up too, but they're not going to be delivered in the next 12 months. They're going to be delivered over a longer period, but we need to start that work and start those discussions around how we scope that out. So absolutely, there will be a range of big and small projects that we need to bring forward, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't do the smaller short-term things now, whilst we also develop a longer-term picture and longer-term plan.
Supplementary on that. That's fine, Chris, but what we're doing in the meantime and the little projects should be aiming towards something larger. We should have a goal which each of these smaller projects build up to. That's what I'm saying.
Do we have any other questions in the room? Oh, Duncan, could you turn your microphone off? Sorry, thank you. Do you have any others? Sorry, I can't see anyone. Yeah, Sarah.
Sorry, Sarah Walker, Clue East. Just adding to what Duncan said, the whole purpose of the Windsor vision was a vision for Windsor, and there was plenty of work done. There were plenty of strategic ideas around coach parking, car parks. You know, the information was there. Residents had their say. We all put a huge amount of time and effort as residents into that. The summary was made, the vision was written, and now you've had a meeting on the 11th, a workshop that sounds like a shorter list, a cutting down, a prioritisation? It sounds like you're watering down considerable work that's been done. And I think Duncan's right. We need a proper formulated plan. We've got the vision, you get the strategy and you write the plan. I can't see that. I see it just being watered down.
Absolutely not. As I said, the three things that we're trying to do in the workshop is what's the more detailed work we need to do around those long-term strategies, because the ideas are great, but bringing them into reality takes quite a lot of work. We won't just be closing roads and knocking down car parks without the detailed feasibility work that needs to go alongside that. So absolutely, it's not about watering down. It's about identifying which of those big studies that we need to do around sort of feasibility. We do have to prioritise them. There is only a limited amount of resource within the council to be able to drive things forward. So we will have to prioritise and decide which are most important to take forward first. And therefore, there has to be that piece of work. But in the short term, we also want to continue to drive improvements in terms of some of the quick wins that we can deliver to help make Windsor better and work better. So I think this is not about watering down. It's about how do we prioritise taking forward some things in the short term alongside progressing the feasibility studies on the bigger things. That piece of work was really about how do we turn this into reality? How do we start to develop a plan? That happened 8 days ago. I'm now presenting at the Windsor Town Forum, and absolutely we can come back in November with some clearer worked out plans for that. But absolutely, we're not looking to water down the vision at all. Okay,
thank you. And yeah, we definitely like to see a list of potential quick wins in the next town forum. I think I speak. I'm sure the residents agree. Would everyone like to see that at the next meeting? Yeah, the quick wins at least. So, gentlemen at the end, would you like to introduce yourself? Thank you.
Yeah, I'm Nigel Griffin. I'm a local resident. I would like to ask, who's setting the budget? Where's the funding coming from? Everything's been said about strategy, it's great, a lot of work's been put in it. Nothing's going to happen unless funds are put aside. Who is responsible for determining the level of funds that's going to be put to the council, presumably, because this is going to cost money? And who, amongst our elected representatives, is championing this programme? That's a question for the chair.
Okay, thank you. Chris, would you like to answer at least the first part, and then?
So I can certainly answer the first part, and that part of the work at the workshop was about identifying if there are existing funding streams that we can put towards some of these projects. So, for example, we have funding from government through something called the UK Shared Prosperity Fund, where there is an opportunity to put some money into this. Fundamentally, the council's budget is set at full council in February. Some things will need money, some things will need people's time, and I suppose that's part of the prioritisation work that we will do, working with the administration to determine what money we can put into the budget, whether that's capital or revenue, and also prioritising where we want to spend officer time on this work. So that would very much be a combination of members, but then decided by council as part of the budget setting process.
Thank you. And in terms of who will be leading that for Windsor, actually, we have the lead member for Windsor here. So I'm just going to hand over to Councillor Teasing.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. I was involved in Windsor Vision for some of the stakeholder meetings at an early stage before I was the lead member for Windsor. And it's really important to me that we don't just take this piece of work and put it on the shelf and forget about it. So I'm really looking forward to working with Andrew and the rest of the team. Chris, Andrew, the rest of the team to progress it. And in fact, I've started talking to local businesses in the town about their involvement and how we draw together the Windsor Town Partnership, the Visit Windsor strategy that we're writing, and how the Windsor Vision, how they all come together. And there's no point having all these separate documents that are all pulling in different directions, making sure they're actually all coming together and help us to deliver it. And some of these things could be delivered through our highways program. Some of them could be delivered through things like the partnership, having a strategy. It's one of the things that we've spoken about, that the partnership really could do with a good sense of direction. So I'm quite excited. I'm going to be championing it because I live in Windsor and I want it to be a great place. Obviously with other lead members in the relevant areas.
Thank you. Got a question from the lady there. Could you like to introduce yourself? Thank you.
My name is Rhian Porteous and I'm a local resident. And just a question around, once again, I've heard it's all about, for me, sitting here, this is about the businesses, Windsor. And I know that before this vision for Windsor was set up, there was a lot of concern that for residents, they were not involved in anything that was to do with any town centre work. Like the neighbourhood plan specifically was excluded from this area, and there obviously I'd like to know who on the residents, which are there a number of residents who are actually involved in these meeting groups that you're currently holding and looking at where we go in the future.
Chris, do you have a chance to that?
So obviously the meeting that we've just held was council officers, and that was to develop some of the ideas into further detail. But the Windsor Vision was obviously written with a lot of input from residents, and as part of the reason why we're coming to the town forum to talk about it, and why I'd like to continue to come back to the town forum to help us shape this. But individual projects, as well as they come forward, we're going to need to put residents at the heart of that in our community. So in terms of developing, and that was my point, as we bring forward individual projects as well, we want those to be shaped in partnership with residents, making sure that the objectives are clear, the scope is clear, on what we're trying to achieve. So absolutely, this piece of work was grounded in working with residents, and we want that to continue.
Yeah, if you have a look at the documents for Vision for Windsor, you will actually see a list of all the stakeholders that were involved in decision making. Thank you for your question. Councillor Wilson.
Thanks very much, Chair. Yeah, just wanted to sort of, I guess, fill in a gap here, which is obviously myself, Devon and Julian are the elected representatives for Eton and Castle, and obviously the Castle part of our ward is a really key part of the Windsor Vision. So we've been heavily involved pretty much since the 5th of May in talking to residents, talking to businesses, talking to officers, hearing a lot of the issues and meeting and getting basically stuck into all the various issues. There are some big plans. There are sort of concepts around one-way systems, pedestrianisation, all sorts of things, and basically we're having a lot of dialogue around that, a lot of discussions, and basically carrying the residents' view. So on their behalf, our primary role in these discussions is the representation of the residents' views, which we obviously picked a lot up earlier this year, and obviously continue to be the key point of contact for residents. So it is a very exciting time, and there's potentially some big projects on the horizon, all the challenges around funding, etc. But yeah, that's something we're very excited to be involved in.
Excellent. Are there any more questions in the room for Chris before we move on to the next topic on the agenda? Thank you very much, Chris. I really appreciate it, and yeah, we would welcome you back next month and at future meetings. That would be great. So now I'm going to hand over to
Mr. Singh's got his hand up.
I'm sorry, Mr. Singh, do you have a question?
Yes, I'm sorry. Yes, I do. Well, I'm only a resident, right? So it's possible that you guys have already considered some of these things and rejected it for whatever reason. But as a resident, and I've been living here now since '96, and there are two things that are kind of lacking in Windsor. I mean, Windsor is great for restaurants. I mean, even recently there's mango tree, and delicious food have opened up. So that's enhanced, that side of things very well. And then the Windsor Castle and I suppose Theatre Royal to some extent helps to attract the tourists. But what is lacking, it's been lacking for a long time, cinema, and more important for me personally is a live music venue. I know sometime Theatre Royal puts on, musical evenings, but not the same thing. So as this is Windsor vision, and I'm guessing that's, for the next 20, 25 years, and if you guys don't start thinking about that, I mean, it would be, it doesn't make sense to put a jazz club in Slough, but it does make sense to put a jazz club in Windsor because it attracts all these millions of tourists and they come, they eat food, and then they say, oh, now what? No, nothing. So is that something you can consider as part of the vision, a cinema and probably a club, hopefully a jazz club, but any music club? Hello?
Hi. Yes.
Question. Yeah, I'll hand over to Chris. Thank you.
So obviously we can't force a jazz club to open, but I think Paul highlighted we're engaging with agents, with landlords, and trying to find ways to diversify the town centre and bring the right sorts of things in. There's been a lot of feedback. There's not a lot for families necessary to do in the town centre, and I know some of the new developments may well bring forward uses that are best for that. But absolutely, as part of this process, we want to work with residents and visitors to bring forward things that they're going to enjoy being in the town centre. We can't force people to open what we want, but we can work in partnership with landlords, with agents to try and bring in that diversification. So I will take that away, and I can't promise you a jazz club next week, but we'll work on how we diversify the town centre very much so.
That's very kind. Thank you.
I think Paul Roach wants to just step in here as well. Thank you.
Yeah, just in support of what Chris said, one of the other developments that we've got coming forward is obviously the Windsor Yards development, and that was approved back in May, and that does include I think it's 3-screen boutique cinema. So if and when that proposal comes forward, hopefully your prayers for a cinema will be answered, Mr. Singh.
Amazing. Thank you.
Well, thank you again, Chris. We're now going to hand over to Shasta Praveen, who is the Service Lead for Infrastructure and Digital Strategy. And this comes from a number of questions that we had at the last meeting about, signals, phone signals and things like that, 5G access in Windsor, general internet access. And obviously it's we need to know what's happening in the future. So I'll hand over to you. Thank you very much for joining us, Shasta.
Thank you so much, Chair. Lawrence, could you please upload the presentation for me from your side?
Sure thing, yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And if you can set it for presentations mode, that would be amazing. Thank you, Lawrence.
I think just let the Zoom bar more disappear.
It's at the top of the top ribbon.
Just the Zoom share is just in the way.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you very much. If you can go to the next slide for me. First of all, thank you so much for allowing me to be part of the meeting. I'm really excited to be here, and I know there's been lots and lots of questions that have been coming through, but what I wanted to do was just to give you a bit of a flavour of everything that's been going on behind the scenes with regards to connectivity, Wi-Fi and internet, and hopefully be able to answer some of your questions. So as part of the borough, we are part, and we joined the Digital Infrastructure Group. So we are part of the board, and you're probably thinking, who are DIG? you know, what are they made up of? It's a pan-Berkshire organisation where we work with our neighbours. So we're working with the 6 local authorities, which includes Reading, Bracknell, Slough, Woking and West Berkshire, and also the local enterprise partnerships. And the collective aim of the digital infrastructure group is to work together. And what we're wanting to achieve for Berkshire is a connected Berkshire. We want to make sure that everybody is working together to make sure that we're bringing the digital infrastructure for our residents and businesses. If you can go to the next slide for me, Lawrence. And the reason that we joined the digital infrastructure group was really, in a very brief nutshell, to improve digital connectivity across the borough. And also we were wanting to support the corporate plan goals. We want to provide an opportunity for residents, businesses, to work together and look at emerging digital technology and make sure that we're bringing it home to our local area, to the borough, so that everybody is able to connect. The other main reason to be part of the DIG group is that we want a uniformed approach, which basically means that it's to make it easy for infrastructure companies to come to the area and work with us. So whether you're working with RBWM or whether Reading, you'll have the same approach, because we are working collaboratively together to make sure that we are delivering what we say we wanted to deliver. And we recently have signed the digital adoption strategy, which was on the 11th of July. And that is outlining the goals that we want to achieve as part of the DIG group. And primarily it's to support economic development and business engagement. So I'm really looking forward to and I'm more than happy to come back and give you an updated, even with regards to the adoption strategy that we'll be rolling out. Lawrence, if you're able to pop me to the next slide. Thank you. And the benefits of having and being part of the DIG group is that the ultimate objective is to have high-speed broadband and making sure that's available for everybody. And it's a universal high-quality mobile network coverage. So there's been lots and lots of work that's been happening behind the scenes, including a full audit of the borough, making sure that actually all the columns are fit for purpose, because ultimately this would lead to deployment and mobile coverage on the 5G rollout, which will then lead on to broader and faster broadband coverage, and also enabling opportunities for emerging technology, which is the Internet of Things, small cells, and smart cities, and that's basically what we're wanting to do. And in terms of what we're currently doing, if Lawrence, you can flip to the next screen, we as a borough are, with me and my team, we are engaging with multiple providers, and we're facilitating the rollout of FTTP, and in the tech that basically means full fibre to the premises, which is an all singing, all dancing infrastructure rollout of cables, which will help local residents, because the actual ducts that come in with all this the high-tech fibres are actually coming to the actual premises. City Fibre have rolled out Maidenhead, and they are now in the stage where they will be mobilising and they will be commencing and working on Windsor in particular in early 2024. So that's due to happen very, very soon. And as more details come about in terms of where they will be digging or where they will be coming in terms of Windsor, I'm more than happy to provide that as soon as I get that information. The other success that we've had is that we have been able to roll out to 26 schools within the borough FTTP, which again is allowing the schools to have a choice of internet if they choose to connect, which again is allowing more opportunities for the schools to connect. We're engaging with multiple mobile network providers as well for the rollout of 5G. So again, Windsor is looking very, very strong in terms of successfully, hopefully, having some small cells deployed. But again, that's a work in progress at this moment in time. But these are all the things that are happening in the background. And just to give you a flavour of some of the updates, which sometimes is not always available, if you pop to the next screen, Lawrence, these are the 3 kind of like main providers that have been are digging away in the background and connecting and making sure that we have live connections for local residents, local businesses, so that you are able to have the actual broadband speeds that you're all keen to have and want to have. So City Fibre, just to give you an example, they have a run rate of around 20 connections per week. So they are working very, very hard and very, very fast. And we have regular meetings with providers. So these numbers are only going to go up and up and up. And I'm more than happy, again, to kind of like come back and give you the update of some of these figures, should you wish. And in terms of the timelines for Windsor in particular, currently what's just started, if you pop to the next screen, Lawrence, there's an upgrade program happening at the moment where there's a plan of 864 cabinets that are going to be upgraded, and that's started. So that will slowly be rolling out throughout the borough. And again, like I mentioned, City Fibre are due to roll out their FTTP TTP infrastructure. And I'm just awaiting detailed plans to be able to let you know when they'll be coming. There you go. That's a bit of a flavour for me. Any questions?
That's great. Thank you very much. Do you have any questions from? Okay, John, would you like to ask a question? Thank you.
Hi, John Davey. The high-speed broadband, the fibre, I believe, is something like 10, 20 times faster than the normal broadband. Is that correct?
I believe so.
And I also understand that where you get a latency with the wireless side of things, so it drops off massively in terms of in the house, out in the garden, drops off. You don't get the same reaction, I understand, with the new technologies. Is that right? Because it's coming through glass, isn't it? It's better.
Yeah, I'm going to be honest. I'm not a technical expert, but I can definitely take that information away and be able to give you more of an accurate answer. But I believe that the FTTP, which is full fibre to the premises, is a stronger, faster signal. Is that what you mean, Mr. Davey?
Yeah, exactly that.
Yeah, it is. It's the class is an all singing, all dancing, and that's what everybody. I know that's what my husband loves as well.
Far faster than 5G side of things. So 5G, you're talking there about businesses, etc. So is the focus around this small cell deployment? Will that be on industrial sites and around the town centre where business may benefit from that, or is it the plan to roll it out across the piece?
It's across the piece. It's not. The providers are currently showing their interest in certain locations where they would ideally like to deploy a 5G cell. So we're working collaboratively with the providers. They're showing their interest, and we go through a process where we're actually assessing whether it's viable to actually deploy that cell, if that makes sense, because some of the technology, we have to make sure that when it is deployed, it's deployed correctly and safely, and it tends to be a lamppost, but we need to make sure that those lampposts, for example, are fit for purpose.
Yeah, okay, I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Do you have any more questions from the resident? Oh, yeah, I think there's one on. I think Mr. Thing, do you like to ask your question?
Yeah, yes, indeed. Another thing is, as I say, we've been living here for a long while, and we've been trying to get a faster connection on Park Street. And it's not just me, all our neighbors as well. And every time I, approach one of these companies, Vodafone and all those other companies, they keep telling me, "Oh, no, it's not available on your street." So please, I humbly request to include Park Street in your, by the sign of it, amazing work you're going to do. So will you do that, and will you give us an update in the next meeting?
Mr. Singh, I will definitely do that for you. And I've made a personal note of Park Street. I will take that away and provide some feedback. The providers have been very, very encouraging in terms of, and it really does depend where you've been sending that question, missing. Not that I'm making it, I'm kind of like stand by them, but
sure.
There is a process where you can actually submit questions regarding certain areas, certain postcodes, and then they do timely come back and respond in terms of whether, broadband is available, if you're connected. etc.
Yeah, the unfortunate thing is that some of my neighbors who know more about it than I do are not on this call. But all I can do is quickly summarize that one of our neighbors investigated this area by talking to, I suppose, following the process you're outlining, and reached dead end. And we even considered, and I think it's still under consideration, to try and get it done, all of us on Park Street, privately, which would cost thousands of pounds, which is not what the road I want to go down. So it would be nice to find out, if there is a kind of an obstacle, but hopefully you will overcome any such obstacles.
Absolutely, Ms. Singh. And like I said, I will take that away and I'll do a little bit of investigation work, because there's another point that I'm going to take away, which was one of the councillors raised, which was Pescud Street in terms of connectivity around there.
Right.
So I will definitely take that away, Mrs. Singh, and come back with some feedback for you.
Thank you.
I think we've got issues across the whole town centre, and also I will be emailing you because we're trying to get internet into a local business and it's been impossible. So
please do. Yeah, you've got my name, and apologies, councillor, for the gentleman who mentioned Pescud Street, that I can give a little bit of feedback on Pescud Street. It is being investigated. There have been some engineers that have been deployed. Again, I'm not making excuses, but because of the holiday period, I think some of the messages did get a little bit to one side, but I've picked that up, and that was actually on my agenda today.
Okay, thank you.
When I spoke to, and I will come back to you. So apologies there.
Got a question from John Webb. Would you like to ask you a question?
Thank you, Chair. I think you just highlighted the thing I was going to talk about. I've been working also with this local business to try and get them some type of internet access. And we worked from the beginning of December last year, all the way through to last month, when they told us it isn't impossible to get internet access to a business. And it's off of a B road. It's a major road in Dedworth.
Okay.
It's 100 yards from the actual road, but we found it impossible to get any type of internet access other than a 4G signal.
Okay.
And we really do need help with
Yep.
it. I'm sure there are other dead spots around the town as well.
No, absolutely. I will definitely take that away. And like I said, I'm more than happy to come back and feedback my investigation once I've done that. But I understand that I have sort of like seen some communications regarding the business, and let me look into that if I may. And
there was one other thing I'd like to feed back to you with regard to people who rent properties. They're often forced to take out 12-month, 24-month leases with the internet companies, and often they're only on a 6-month tenure or a 12-month tenure, and they may be required to have an 18-month service with their service provider. Is there anything that the partnership can do to help encourage internet service providers to offer shorter term contracts that don't cost a fortune?
I've made a note of that, because that's something that I can investigate. I wouldn't be able to comment on the actual contracts and the providers, but I can definitely take that away and look into it for you again and feedback. But I understand in terms of the rental property and the terms.
Yeah.
I understand.
Timekeeping would help people who let properties, because they wouldn't be then into long-term contracts with fixed service providers. If they move down the country, they can get that same provider down the country as well on a 5G contract on their phone. Whereas with BT, you can't necessarily take that away. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Chair, would it be okay if I just stepped in on that point?
Yeah, please do. Yeah.
Just quickly, one of the things that collectively the group was working on was more affordable tariffs that could come forward, particularly for those with low incomes. That's one of the benefits of the sort of Berkshire authorities working together, because we have more clout in those discussions with operators. And I think that's probably a point that we can take away into those discussions when we're working collectively with the other authorities to talk about, in the same way as rail companies have had to move towards kind of 3-day-a-week commute passes. I think having some sort of product that works well for renters and us engaging with the companies about how something could be developed, I think would be a really useful conversation to have with industry, and we can do that collectively.
Thank you, that's great. Although please remember, not everyone who rents is on a low income, especially in Windsor. So we've got a question online from Elliot. I'm going to take that and then we'll go to John, the other John. Thank you. Elliot, would you like to ask your question?
Yeah, of course. Thank you, Chair. Elliot Howells here. I'm a local resident. It feels like there's two issues at play here. There's the issue of getting fast broadband into homes, and the updates have been helpful in that regard. But I think there's a broader issue with signal capacity as opposed to signal speed in town. Now, obviously, 5G cells are going to help the speed of that signal when it's available. But if you try and access any kind of a website or anything that requires an internet connection at peak times in town, even 3G would be helpful. And it seems to be an issue with capacity as opposed to signal strength. Is there any work being done to address that?
That is something that I'll have to take away, Elliot, if you don't mind, because I would need to have a conversation with some of the suppliers and the providers, because if you're mentioning peak times, that is something that I would need to just have a little look into, if that's okay.
Yeah, of course. And anecdotally, the local businesses in the area often blame signal blockers around the castle and things like that for security purposes. I'm not sure what truth is in that, but if you go into town on a Saturday afternoon, even getting 3G would be helpful, let alone 4G or 5G.
Yeah. No, I will definitely have a look into that for you, Elliot, and again feed that back, because I would need to, I need to have a little bit of an investigation on that. And also, you mentioned signal blockers. I'll have a few conversations with some internal colleagues.
Sure, thank you.
Thank you for the question. Nice smiley profile picture as well. Cheered us all up. David, would you like to ask your question?
Well, it's not a question so much as an observation. Planning are currently considering an upgrade opposite Greg's on top of Subway. So there's some towers there that obviously probably are 4G, and they're looking at boosting them up to 5G. So it might be worth just looking at that in the planning department, asking them what's going on with it. I would imagine it will happen because it seems to have gone beyond the 56-day rule. And I would suggest that this sort of thing in the town centre is appropriate. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Is there any other questions? I think. Is the gentleman in the green jacket? Did you have a question? So I can't see you. oh, sorry. Yes. Do you have a question? Sorry. Thank you.
Right. Thank you for your vote. From Windsor, West Windsor. Just a question about how does the DIG group target which areas to prioritise to give the 5G?
Sorry, was that question with regards to
the rollout of the FTTP?
Who determines that program? Is that the question? It's not necessarily the DIG group that actually comes via the actual providers. So it was an opportunity for providers to actually bid for the actual projects, which is kind of like through a kind of like a government portal, and the rollout and the actual as when it will happen was more determined from those lots, if that makes sense. So it's not really determined from DIG group, but what we do in what we find out from the DIG group is find out when things are happening, so then we're able to step in and support the facilitation process. So for example, City Fibre was working very hard across Maidenhead, and they set up and they wanted some community drop-in sessions set up. So that was something that I supported with some of my colleagues, where local residents were able to come along and actually speak directly with the provider. So they were able to raise things like, connectivity issues. What's the process going to be? When's the next program? When's the next street going to be? Having FTTP, for example. So there's a very long process and a program, and as soon as I get the information, then I'm able to relay it. But at the moment, the Windsor detail of which street's going when, I don't have to hand, unfortunately.
Okay, thank you. I've got a question from Councillor Peasy.
Thank you. It's just another question on rollout, really. When we're talking about Windsor, are we talking about Windsor town centre, or is it the wider town of Windsor? And secondly, the Eton and Castle ward, Devon and Julian and Mark's ward, covers Eton and Eton Wick, and there's a bit between Eton and Eton Wick that's quite rural, and that's an area that people certainly earlier this year were saying, when are we getting it? We need it here. The speeds are terrible. You know, we can't work from home. It's a real problem. So I don't know if you'd be able to chase up the rollout in that area as well.
I can absolutely do that, Councillor. With regards to the Windsor, it's actually Windsor wide in terms of, and I do have a location map of where it covers. With regards to Eton, there are certain pockets that we are looking into and investigating and trying to bridge that connectivity piece, because I'm aware of those rural areas. I had a similar situation in another area of the borough.
Thank you very much. That all sounds quite positive. Hopefully we'll get connected very soon. Is there any more questions around this topic? Well, thank you very much, Shaskin. Oh, sorry, sorry, there is one more question. I'm
okay.
Sorry. Judge, what's the question?
Sorry, Gareth Jones, Deadwood. I'm not knocking the scheme. I think it's an excellent scheme. I'm just wondering, in the rollout, do you envision what level of disruption do you envision? Like roadworks, talk about doing the boxes. Do you have to dig up any streets, etc.?
I'm not going to lie, there will be an element of slight disruption. However, it's very well communicated, and we work very closely with the providers to make sure that that is minimised as much as possible. With City Fibre, when they were working in Maidenhead in particular, I have to say they were very good. I mean, they were on my street. I'm a Maidenhead resident myself, and you know, they communicated very, very well, and they really are welcoming residents and businesses to actually have conversations with them. So if there is a problem spot or an area that does need a little bit of support, or there is going to be major disruption, they will work with that local area. And I've been involved in some of those conversations to make sure that all the dots have been joined up together to make sure it is minimum.
So any more questions? No? Okay, well, thank you very much. It's really useful, very good information. So the next topic on the agenda is residents' questions and item suggestions for the next forum. I know last time we suggested that we had trees on the agenda. Unfortunately, we couldn't get it on this one, but actually I think we've had a pretty full agenda anyway. Just want to try and keep these meetings to, you know, 2 hours maximum, if we can. So does anyone have any topics or any other questions that you wanted to ask? Gareth, would you like to ask a question?
Yeah, so I'm a member of the WAM CLT. So we have an interest in the local borough plan sites.
Can you explain what that is for people who don't know?
It's community land for us. It's about providing housing for the community indefinitely, perpetuity. I was wondering if there's any updates or current status of the local borough plan sites AL 21 and 22 West Windsor.
Councillor Teasy, do you have any updates?
Yes, in my other role as chair of Windsor Planning. Just switch my hats around. So I believe that, well, the outline permission on, to remember the numbers now, on the one next to Aldi, west of Windsor, that was approved earlier on this year, and the reserved matters, which is like the detail of the actual design of the plan, that will be coming to the panel shortly, possibly next month, I think. And yeah, so that's that one. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. That's it. Yeah, the other one's built. Because the other one was the one that was on Squires.
Yeah, Squires.
So the only one that's outstanding is the reserve matters on 21. Thanks.
Thank you. Yeah, Ria.
Raymond, my question is around enforcement, and my understanding is that the enforcement team within planning is understaffed. And therefore, the question that sits with it relates obviously to for me, representing the residents of Elm Road at this moment in time, is with regards to the speed, or what would seem to the local residents, lack of speed with regards to enforcement of the removal of the signage and the fencing and the enclosure of the pathway between Elmer Road and Van Sittart Road. We have had the support, and we very much appreciate this, of our local councillors. We have gone to see how very well supported we've all felt, but we are concerned about the speed or lack of, and the fact that this has been regarded as being a medium of medium importance, and therefore does not seem to have much clout with regards to resolving the issue. As of yesterday afternoon, the owners of the property, the land, and I have to say it is in private hands, this piece of land, did move the fencing because of the highways works and the highway stating that it was obviously part of the highways and it had been blocked. What we would like as residents is to re-emphasise to everyone here and try and get some more support about the fact that this piece of land is part of a green area. Since the mid-80s, it has been recognised as being a green area for the residents of Windsor, plus the pathway. But in terms of the planning enforcement, it seems to be working at rather a snail's pace to resolve the issue. Now, I'm not saying it's easy, but in terms of the local residents, this started on the 30th of May. And it's giving residents a lot of concern. Not so much residents, actually. It's also concerned about the safety and security. Now, the moving of the fence has allowed those people who use that walkway to use it much more efficiently now, because it's back to the much wider area. But it's about the fact that a 3-4 metre, no, it's probably about a 4 or 5 metre strip is actually now fenced off. It looks absolutely ghastly, and it is not maintained in any shape or form.
Thank you for your question. Yeah, I'm very aware of it. It's very near where I live. I walk past it most days, and if a cyclist is coming, I often, yeah, have to get out of the way. But I think Councillor Wilson, you have the right to answer this. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so I absolutely share your concern about the piece of land. It's very close to where I live, and I use that cycleway a lot. And I also appreciate your frustration in terms of the pace of planning enforcement. And it seems, certainly we're very aware, and I'm making the planning enforcement officers aware of every move. I'm still understanding exactly what their process is. There is a challenge in terms of communicating with the owners. So highways have been in communication with, I think, one of the owners' agents, and that, I think, has sort of facilitated the fence moving, which at least is something. But so far as I'm aware, planning enforcement have not made contact at all, which is clearly a problem and does not bode well. So from my perspective, this is a very high risk site. Yes, it's very, in that sense, very much on my radar. I think in terms of updates, I want to catch up with the planning enforcement officer this week and see where he is, by the end of the week, and see what's happening. But it does seem that sometimes in planning things move quite slowly, so apologies for that. But it's something we're very aware of. And I've also contacted the local sort of PCSO in anticipation of possibly some work starting and a large number of people gathering to object, and almost effectively have a contingency plan for that event. And I think I've shared that with yourself and a couple of the other residents in terms of what we do if something starts happening without approval. Yeah, it's and absolutely consider it very serious with it being in the conservation area and a key piece of green space in that part of town.
Thank you, Mark. I mean, we really have appreciated the support from the council. I think the overriding factor that sits within certainly residents who've been around since 2010, when we have had 2 planning applications for the ex-Imperial House site and a very recent consultation for perhaps a further application with regards to the old Imperial House site. And the fact that this sort of occurred around the same time has raised a lot of concerns about where things are going within Windsor. So just more about, another thing, because this could be the 3rd application around that site. Lots of concerns around making sure that what if we get there gets right one. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions or any suggestions for future topics? John?
Yeah, you mentioned about changing the name would be discussed at the Windsor Council meeting. Now, having experienced that, that's not a debating chamber, that's people giving a short presentation. So what's the thinking behind changing the name?
So at not the last meeting, the meeting before, it was suggested that we changed it to Windsor Forum because it's not just about Windsor Town. Now, the actual official name, according to the Constitution, is Windsor Area Forum. So it was also suggested that maybe we call it that, but and then we probably wouldn't need to change it because that's what it is in the Constitution already. But also, from my perspective, our Windsor Town Forum, the initials are WTF, which causes quite a lot of amusement to people. So it would be really good to remove that. But I mean, I don't really mind what it's called. It's important that residents are aware, that this is their meeting, this is for them. I mean, it's appreciated that you're here tonight. Does it matter what it's called? I'm only putting it forward because it was requested at a previous Windsor Town Forum.
I'm just thinking that it includes Datchet, if I'm not wrong.
No, it doesn't. No.
Just Windsor.
No, so
Just
it's the unparished wards of Windsor, yeah. So it's Clewer and Dedworth East, Clewer and Dedworth West, Clewer East, well, Eton and Castle, obviously some of Eton and Castle is but it's the unparished bit. Yeah, so Old Windsor, because some of that is also unparished of the Bolton there.
Okay, so the unparished
Yeah,
stuff, right?
yeah.
Okay, 'cause before we had councillors from those different areas.
Yeah, no. So we just have the unparished ones. Is there any more? So does anyone else have an opinion? I mean, happy to majority. I'm just going to post something on various social media sites to get general residents' opinions, but yeah.
Just to say, I thought that the whole reason why the discussion was around Windsor Forum was to be a lot more inclusive rather than exclusive, because we've never had that before. And I think people rather like the idea of it being inclusive.
So we'll try and get trees on the agenda in a future meeting. And obviously we're going to get a Vision for Windsor update at the next meeting as well. Oh, and Councillor Teese just suggested maybe get something from Visit Windsor. Is that of interest? Possibly. Well, we'll try and get some general feedback. Is there another question? Oh, Mr. Singh, I think have you got a suggestion for a future talk?
Well, no, I think you just mentioned it, but I just want to make sure that as part of the Windsor Vision update, that the quick wins will be included, right? So that we hopefully you'll circulate a list of quick wins before the next meeting. So that was the first point. The second point is just a point of clarification. I've seen in your documents, 2 dates for the next meeting. One mentions 9th of November, other mentions 8th of November. So which one is it for the next meeting?
I have that same question, but we got So I was going to ask Lawrence that now actually about the next meeting, because it says here on the 8th of November, which is a Wednesday. I have it on the Thursday, the 9th of November, but it's normally on a Tuesday.
Yeah, I think it's the 9th of November, maybe because there's been a rearrangement of council meetings, notably cabinet and full council, and thus some meetings have to be shifted to accommodate them. So the next meeting should be Thursday, the 9th of November.
Oh, good. So it's 9th of November. Thank you. That's it.
Thursday, the 9th of November.
Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, I need to check the other dates as well. So 11th of January also appears to be a Wednesday, I think. So so is that confirmed? So that Thursday, the 9th of November, that's the date that's in my calendar. So that's the date for the next meeting. And if there's no more questions, I think we can. Oh, actually, sorry, we do just have one more question.
Yeah, just a really. The programme for the refurbishment of the bridge from the car park seemed to have been delayed a bit, been hanging around for a very long time. Project, and it seemed to lead to a minor demonstration, which is reported in the press. It seemed to be. Are there any lessons to be learned about consultation here? Has it been taken note of?
Yeah, I'll ask Councillor Davies to give an update.
Yeah, thanks. There are certain lessons to learn. It's our job as councillors to provide scrutiny sometimes, and we need to engage with, make sure businesses know what's going on. I think communication in general needs to be improved. The reported system, when you report them, you don't get any feedback of what's happening. Planning is hard to see. There's a new CRM, it's a computery thing that's coming soon, and hopefully we can make some updates to it. Me and another councillor called Jack Douglas are very techie people. We'll get on that and hopefully have better communication in the future. Thank you.
Chris, I don't know if you have anything more to add about the reason why we're delaying the work on the footbridge. Yeah, it was a press release that came out as part of the agenda.
Yeah, so in effect, as a result of the feedback from businesses, we've looked at the programme in terms of splitting it rather than doing the lift works and the bridge works at the same time. We'll be splitting out the lift works, doing those first, which will enable the bridge to remain open during the kind of Christmas trading periods. And actually, with any further delays to the original programme, we wouldn't have been able to do the bridge works anyway this side of Christmas. So the bridge refurbishment works will happen after Christmas, which is the period of kind of lowest footfall, both from the coach park and more broadly. So we'll be able to miss that important kind of Christmas trading period. I think a lot of the issues came out of the fact that obviously to do works on the bridge, we need to have an agreement with Network Rail, and Network Rail were insistent that they pick up the discussions with businesses and the Arch company as part of that engagement. Clearly, for whatever reason, that hasn't been picked up as well as we would have hoped. But I think that the lesson learned from our perspective is irrelevant of other organisations engaging. It's really important that we're really close to our businesses, and I know Paul works very close to the businesses in Windsor just to make sure that they are getting the information that they need. But we have listened, we've changed the programme, and hopefully this will mean that the impacts on businesses as a result of the works are going to be much improved. So I think we've got to the right outcome.
Thank you, Councillor Teasy.
Thank you. And can Chris, can I just pass on my thanks to you and the rest of the team, everyone involved, because actually there was an awful lot of email traffic, rightly so. You know, businesses and residents were really concerned, and the ward councillors picked up a lot of that. And you know, you weren't really having to firefight and come up with a plan that worked for all. So thank you for doing that. That's great.
Thank you. Okay, so we don't have any more questions. I think we can close the meeting and hope to see you all on the 9th of November. Thank you very much. Bye.